Okay, this team is just stacked. What's going on, everybody? The New York sports fan Josh Byrne, and today I'm talking about the New York Jets. They just signed star running back Dalvin Cook, and last night was the premiere of episode number 2 of Hard Knocks, so I'm going to get into both of that. First off, Dalvin Cook. So the Jets signed Dalvin Cook after what felt like weeks and weeks of talk of, oh, the Jets are interested. Dalvin's got his list down to 3 teams. Then a few days ago, the Patriots, they go out and sign Ezekiel Elliott. And that kind of felt like the last domino to fall before Joe Douglas and the Jets front office swooped in and made a final serious push to sign Dalvin Cook, who ultimately signed with the Jets for 1 year and just around $8 million. So my thoughts on this, I'm excited, man. I mean, how could you not be? You're bringing in a star-level player, another explosive threat to what should be a really exciting offense to watch. And at the end of the day, Dalvin Cook, is he what he was 2 years ago? Maybe not, but he's still a really darn good player. He's still a player who ran for well over 1,000 yards last year, a player who ran for over 4 yards a carry. And the most important aspect of Dalvin Cook and this signing is that it helps ease Breece Hall back in. I mean, Breece Hall tore his ACL. You know, you don't need a doctor to tell you that that's a severe injury and that is a long-winded recovery. And it was nice to see the other day that Breece Hall was activated off of the physically unable to perform list. But that is just one step. And honestly, the Jets' goal this year is a championship. And the Jets are going to need Breece Hall for the long run. And how are they going to ensure that Breece Hall is healthy throughout the season? Well, bringing in a tailback like Dalvin Cook, a guy who's used to a large workload, a guy who's proven, if anything, that he can stick throughout a season and take the bruises and the scars that are entailed with a long National Football League season, that will help immensely for Breece Hall. Now all of a sudden, there is very little to any pressure on Breece Hall to take 15 to 20 carries in the first few weeks of the season. The Jets don't need him to do that. The Jets can lean on Dalvin Cook for the early part of the season and then continue to give Breece Hall more and more touches as the season goes on. And that's going to be huge. That's going to be huge for Breece and his recovery and how effective he is. And that's going to be huge for Dalvin as well, because at the end of the day, Dalvin is 28. He has a lot of mileage on those legs. So it's going to be in the best interest of both Dalvin and Breece to have both of those star-level running backs on the same squad to help ease the burden of each other and put less on the backs of both players. Not to mention, the Jets already had a solid backfield even before they brought in Dalvin Cook. They already had Michael Carter. They already had Israel Abanikanda. And they already had Zonovan Knight, who proved at the end of last year that he can be a very capable running back at the NFL level. I do wonder how much of a workload those guys are going to get, and I'd have to figure that at least one of those guys is not going to make the roster, because this team is not going to carry 5 running backs. No team does. That's just not something that happens. And with Aaron Rodgers as your quarterback, I don't see them running the ball 70 times a game and actually needing 5 running backs. I just don't see a world where that's a possibility. And that's not a knock on any of those other running backs. But when you bring in Dalvin Cook, like it or not, one of those other 3 guys, whether it be Izzy, MC, or Bam, they've got to go. And I've got to think Israel Abanikanda, the Jets' 5th-round pick this year out of the University of Pittsburgh, I've got to think that he is safe on this roster, because you don't just let go of your 5th-round pick in his rookie year. Not to mention, he's looked really explosive in the first 2 preseason games, and I believe he's shown a lot. Michael Carter apparently has had a great training camp, and Zonovan Knight has also had a great training camp. So it's definitely going to be a tough decision for Joe Douglas. If I had to choose or guess which running back is out the window, I think it's probably going to be Zonovan Knight. He's a guy, he wasn't drafted, and he's a guy who I could see being let go. It also wouldn't shock me if Michael Carter is let go, perhaps in a trade, and maybe a trade for an offensive tackle. Now, I don't know, Michael Carter, he's a running back. His value is not high enough to attain a starting level tackle, but what I do know is that the main complaint of this Dalvin Cook signing, and it's not really a complaint about Dalvin Cook himself, but what I've heard is Jets fans and NFL fans are questioning, why would you invest $8 million in a running back in a position that the Jets are already pretty solid in, when the main question mark, the main potential weakness on this Jets roster is the offensive line, and specifically the tackle position. And so far through this training camp, it's been an absolute carousel of different offensive line units. One of the main issues is that the Jets have not been able to maintain 5 guys on a consistent level to be out there on the first team offense. And that means regardless of whoever does ultimately start week 1, they're going to have very little time between now and then to gel together. Elijah Vera-Tucker is currently hurt. Dwayne Brown currently has not played at all this summer, and he's slotted in to be the starting left or right tackle on the Jets. Mekhi has been healthy. Mekhi Becton has been healthy, but he has yet to prove that he can stay healthy through an entire game. In order for Mekhi Becton to be a starter on this team, he's going to have to prove that he can make it through an NFL game from snap 1 to the end of the game. And whether it's fair to him or not, the reality of the situation is he has not proven that yet. This is a guy who hasn't played in a full NFL game in just over 2 years now, so while his talent level may be the highest amongst all of the Jets' offensive linemen, the sustainability level is a huge unknown, and if the Jets are going to have a really successful offensive line, they're probably going to need Mekhi Becton to come through. But tell me, who is out there right now that the Jets could bring in, slot in right to the line right now? The answer is probably nobody. Solid offensive linemen, especially tackles, starting level offensive tackles just don't grow on trees. And NFL teams are not just going to give up a starting caliber tackle at this juncture of the preseason. It's just not going to happen. Whether you like it or not, there's 2 paths that the Jets can go. Either they hope and pray that their current offensive line can come together, get healthy, and gel before or at least through the early part of the season and get better throughout the campaign, or they're going to have to vastly overpay to get an external resource and bring into the roster. I don't think that's happening. I really don't. I think they're banking on Dwayne Brown, a guy who's been around the league for a long time and proved he can make it through the battles of the season. And they're banking on either Max Mitchell or Wes Schneitzer or Mekhi Becton to give them really significant playing time at one of the tackle positions. Ultimately, I think the Jets have at least an average level offensive line, but it's certainly a question mark, and it's something that's worth watching going forward. Now, the other main storyline is Hard Knocks, and we've seen 2 episodes so far, and one of the main reactions I've seen is how Robert Saleh is interacting with his team. I've seen a lot of people say, oh, Robert Saleh's too soft, he's a really nice guy, but he's not hard enough on his players. Well, episode 2 is a far cry from that narrative because he went hard on his own offensive line. You know, it may not be their fault because at a talent level, I just don't know with the injuries and with the guys who had to slot in, like Joe Tippmann, like Wes Schneitzer, like Billy Turner. I don't know if it's their fault that they played so badly, because what do you really expect from those guys? But at the same time, Coach Robert Saleh did not mince words. He said pretty much that you can have all the shiny toys. You can have the Hall of Fame quarterback. You can have the expensive receivers. You can have the explosive running backs. But at the end of the day, if the offensive line is not getting the job done, then the offense is going to have the same results as last year. And those results were not very good, as we all know. So I think the offensive line is definitely the main concern. And if Hard Knocks has taught you anything, it's that the coaching staff is aware of the potential weakness on this Jets offense. So it's certainly going to be something to watch, folks. I think for me, I feel great about this entire Jets roster except for the offensive line. The tackle position needs to be figured out. If it isn't, then Joe Douglas is going to need to go down the path of overpaying for an external tackle, because you can't put together a roster with this much talent and then just completely blind yourself from the biggest weakness, a weakness at tackle. And that's a weakness that can completely derail a season, especially when your quarterback is 40 years old. God forbid something happens to Aaron Rodgers, but I hate to say it, would it really surprise anybody if he takes a beating in the first couple weeks of the season? With how the tackle depth is looking right now, it certainly wouldn't surprise me. So hopefully, if anything, if the offensive line does struggle, then Joe Douglas takes action. Let me know what you think of the Jets signing of Dalvin Cook and their offensive line concerns, along with what you think of Hard Knocks and how it portrays Robert Saleh in the first 2 episodes. As always, folks, you've been watching The New York Sports Fan, and all the love.